Chapter 3 is change. How do people change? And it starts by describing how change looks over time, with stops and starts along a crooked line, with practice, with ambivalence, and with anguish, with effort, with joy. But what it says in the second paragraph, the process is different for each person. And there's no one size fits all. But there are cardinal features of change. And when you can appreciate those features of change, then you can appreciate when change is actually happening in your life. You'll know it when you see it. And a better understanding of change can bolster your patience and perseverance. If you know that slips and ambivalence are normal, although they're painful, slips are painful, if you recognize it as a normal part of change, you might be less likely to despair when your loved one commits to change one day. That's kind of hard to wrap your head around, that slips are painful, but the chapter really goes into details of what that exactly means. So this is an extension of the last chapter where we did the behavior analysis, which gave us a better sense of our loved one's specific motivations, of why they use, and insights into why they might change. So once we have those answers, now we talk about, in this chapter, reinforcement. The variable that influences a person to change a particular action. How the world around that person with addiction supports or discourages the choice to change. It talks about on the next page, page 70, if you really want to understand change, if you really want to get into the minds of your loved one, it suggests a really powerful exercise, which is think of something that you've tried to change. An addiction is very similar to that. So whether that be exercise, whether that be dieting or changing your diet, think about some sort of change you've tried to invite into your life and what that process looked like. Was there points where you were ambivalent or felt two-minded about it? Were there points where you slipped? Did you consider that a failure, or did you consider that just part of the process of change? Were there times where you struggled to sustain the change, although you were motivated at one point? Maybe later you weren't so motivated. Maybe it was the new year, you got motivated. After a while, the motivation died down a little bit. Another example it gives, which I think is a good example, is ending a long relationship. Now that could be divorce or a spouse. It could also be a long relationship with a friend that maybe isn't healthy or isn't helpful. And then afterwards, it talks about after that relationship ends, the change that comes about in your life. How you have to fill up the time that used to be filled up with that loved one. How you have to change your schedule and the way you go about your life without that loved one. That in itself is a change. And a lot of times if you think about addiction for our loved ones with addiction, giving up addiction, that consistent, dependable thing that makes us feel good, is a lot like a relationship that when it's gone, our loved ones have to figure out how to fill that void. So the point they're trying to make is that change is hard for everyone. It takes learning. It takes thinking about things in a different way. And it says keeping in mind in a matter of fact, rather than a pessimistic way, that change is just hard for everyone, can help you stay calm and patient and go on living your life through the ups and downs and unexpected parts of change. Because we have the expected, hopeful parts of change, but there's always going to be those unexpected parts of change. Okay, then it goes into the next section, which is the stages of change, which we just went over, so I won't go over in detail. But it talks about the history of it, who came up with it. And basically the idea is that these psychologists, researchers, looked at the common denominators of the change process, whether that be changing how we eat or changing the addiction problem. They all have these common denominators and milestones through the change process. So we talked about pre-contemplation, where the person isn't even thinking about change. It's not even on the table. So I won't go into what it is, but the suggestion it gives is persuading or arguing in the stage will tend to provoke defensiveness. So you want to pick your battles and pick if it's even effective to talk about certain things at that stage. But it says something really important in the second paragraph of that pre-contemplation section. Not arguing for change doesn't mean idly standing by. Remember, you can help even if your loved one doesn't think he wants to change. You can help by reinforcement. You can help by the behavioral change principles that I'll go into soon. The second stage is contemplation. That's when they're thinking about change. They're ambivalent. They're thinking about the good points of change and the bad points of change. And we certainly have a lot of influence in how to tip the balance towards change here. You can validate their lack of readiness. You can help them build motivation. You can help them think about the pros and cons. You're not going to sit there and out of the blue come up with a diagram, but you're going to absorb this diagram that we have here and then slip it organically into conversations that you have with your loved one. So you want to think about this and take it with the seriousness that we've been taking it, but then you want to think about realistic ways to implement it and get ideas from other people. The third is preparation. They may not be fully determined to change at this point, or how to accomplish that change, or what their goals are going to be exactly, but this might be a great opportunity to help them set certain things up, like finding support groups for them, helping them think about what does a treatment program look like when they do get ready to take action, so on and so forth. The fourth is the action stage. And this is, I won't go into this because so helpers can, when loved ones are ready to take action towards their addiction, the people helping them can help facilitate this stage by acknowledging the effort, by supporting them, by encouraging them. Then the fifth is the maintenance stage. And for long-term maintenance of any new behavior, the benefits must still outweigh the costs. So it's just keeping the effort up. Now, after it talks about the 5 stages of change, on page 72, it talks, in the bottom of the page, it says, the stages of change model defines change as a process rather than an event. Although we might have a flash of insight into what to do, change is still a process that takes time and effort. People can be at different stages at different times. So they come out of rehab, they're in maintenance, and then they may go back to the contemplation stage or the pre-contemplation stage. Also, recognizing the stage of change helps us to customize our interventions for that stage of change. So what it says here is people fresh out of a 28-day rehab are typically highly motivated, excited about the future in the full access stage. These people want tools, strategies, how to communicate. They want to soak it all in. At this point, it might be helpful to just get out of their way and help them develop tools and strategies. However, these same tools and strategies by the person that's coming out of rehab in the maintenance phase, that might not be as productive to continue to enforce that to somebody in the pre-contemplation stage. You'll have to take a different approach. Engaging people in that stage is not going to be the same as engaging people in the maintenance stage. So it's important to understand that engaging people in ways that don't match what stage they're in is not helpful, even if it seems clear to us that they should change. And even if it seems clear to us what steps they could do to take that and make that change. So even if we know what they should do or what would be helpful for them, it's important to recognize what stage they're in so that we can have a constructive intervention. And then finally, in the last part of this section, it says preconceived notions of how the change process should go will only set you up for disappointment. So it really doesn't matter how much we hope something happens. It doesn't matter how much we really, really want it to happen. Preconceived notions of how something should happen, especially if they're unrealistic, will only set us up for disappointment, as change seldom follows a predictable path. Okay, so that wraps up the stage of change section. Now we're going to go into a new section. We have stages of change, recognizing what's high yield in those stages. Now we're going to go into the behavioral principles of change.